Welcome csc200 to part 2 of our ex7b, where we're going to be inserting SpongeBob characters to a database and displaying our database. And we're doing this in little parts. We're just connecting to the server first, and then we're making sure we're connecting to the database. And we used little statements here. We used if-else statements. And this one up here said if the connection is true. We didn't put if true. And then it's going to say it's connecting to the server. And then this one we use selectDB. We created a variable, and then we use this mySQLi selectDB, and we specified the database name. Now, one thing just to point out here, because in this MySQL connect we're already specifying the database name, we can actually use this. So technically, we could really do this. We could really just copy this if we wanted to. Now, there's nothing wrong with what we did, but we could technically just copy this top line here and just this if con, and I don't even need any of this. I'll comment this out, and I'll replace this right here, and I'll just say if con, because it already has the database name in there. And then what it should say is if that connection works, we're going to say connected successfully to the database name. So you could really do that. So we don't necessarily have to do this. So we're just going to see if that works. So let's try it out. Let's save it. That would actually be simpler, but there's nothing wrong with doing both. Actually, this statement, the mySQLi selectDB, is for changing a database, but we were using it to just select a database, which is fine. But I just wanted to show that there's another way to do this. So I'm going to go back to here, and I'm just going to go back and hit submit again. And then that's showing that it's working. So the same thing worked. So by doing this same statement, that works fine. Just using the if con, and as long as you have that database name in here, I think that's why it says if not using the fourth parameter. So we're using the database name variable in there, and that's how it's connecting to it. So that's fine too. And also, one thing we might want to do is try to break it first and see how these things work, because we're connecting, but what if we don't connect? So you could go up here and just maybe change the database name to one that doesn't exist. So if I just take the B off of SpongeBob, I could go here and let's see if I could just refresh this without going back. And there, it says not connected to server, not connected to database. So it's not connecting to both in here. And the reason that is because actually this way, by using this connection, it's breaking both of them, because this is part of it, because it's something that's in here. So if one thing breaks in this connect, both of them break. So that's one way where the other one might be better. Let me take database name out of there, because I think that's what's breaking both of them. And if I just kind of break the database, it shouldn't affect this one. So it should still connect to the server, but it should not connect to the database. So let me just save that, because what I'm doing here is this thing's connecting to the server. I'm not bringing the database name into it. So it shouldn't care about the database name. It should only connect to the server. So as long as it can connect to localhost, it should be fine. So let me try that one more time. Let me go back here. And this is actually what I wanted to happen. See, it's connecting to the server localhost, but it's not connecting to database. And actually, so the way we did it the first time is probably fine, so you don't even have to mess with it. But at least it's kind of good to see what's happening. So although what you could do is take away the fourth parameter, which it even mentions here in the comments. If you take away that parameter, then this first connection is only connecting to the server. It's not worrying about the database, and then this one is focusing on the database, and that way you could check. It's a little easier to check where the problem is. So in that case, because this B is missing from SpongeBob, I had a problem with just the database, not connected to database, and it's connecting to the localhost. And if I went back and I put B there, and maybe I just messed up something with the localhost, I'll just take the T out and save it. And now you see I'm getting all those errors. And obviously I won't connect to the database either. If I can't connect to the server, I'm not going to connect to the database. So I'm having all those issues there, and that's fine. We just wanted to make sure we could break it. So I'm going to go back and fix things. I'm going to put my T here, and I'll make sure I have my B there. So everything is back the way it is. If I went back here and tried it one more time, everything should be okay as far as what we have so far. And there it is, connected to localhost, server, connected to our SpongeBob database. So everything's working okay here. Now we're going to move on, and what we're going to do is a couple things. Now this gets a little tricky, but we'll kind of take it slow. We're going to create a variable called insert SQL that's going to insert, we're going to use an insert query. So we're going to have to do some SQL inside our PHP. So let's just follow what it says here. It says create a variable, and I'm going to hit tab here called insert SQL. So I'll do insert, follow what it says so far, insert SQL, there it is, and equals. So that's how we create a variable. And remember, variables in PHP get the $. And it says there's going to be an insert query. So we're going to have to go do a mySQLi query. So let's just go take a look and see what that looks like. We're going to look for a mySQLi query, and where I am is PHP, and I went all the way down to PHP reference under the PHP mySQLi section, which is way down at the bottom. PHP mySQLi, and then we'll see our list of things here, and we're just looking for the mySQLi query. And here it is, and let's just see what it does. And here it has mySQLi query, and it's saying connection, and then it has a quote, select from person. So it's actually running SQL statements inside of there. And here's another one. It says, here's a query, and it's running a query inside here. We're not going to do that. We're going to make a variable first so that we could just throw a variable in here. We don't want to write our whole insert statement inside of these parentheses. That'll just be too much work. So what we're going to do, or just be too easy to confuse. So what we're going to do here is, the first thing we're doing is we're creating a variable that basically represents that insert. So even we're going to do it right inside quotes here. We're going to put two quotes here, and we're going to do an insert statement. And we're going to actually go back to SQL, and we're going to go look for an insert into statement. And here it is. Here's insert into. And here's an example that we have here for insert into. Here's a try it yourself, and this is this kind of real long thing here, but we could use this one. So I'm going to copy it right from here, I guess, and I'll just put it right inside these quotes, and there it is, insert into. Now what it's going to have here, we're going to just have to change this a little bit. We're going to say characters, and it's lowercase because that's what we're using in our PHP myadmin. Character table is lowercase c, so we're doing that. So we're saying insert into characters, and what are we putting in here? And we're going to be using our names of our columns. So our names of our columns are going to be, if we look at what columns we have, we're going to have first, last, species, and gender. So we're going to focus on that first, and we'll just put first, last, and then species, and then gender. And we shouldn't have to do the other ones. They should go in themselves. So I'm going to get rid of all the other ones here at the end of this parentheses here, and I'll just kind of end it with gender. So we're going to have 4 here, insert into characters, first, last, species, and gender, and it should do the ID and the city automatic. So we're going to skip that. Now what we're going to put down here, and this, you could wrap this or whatever, but for our values that we're going to have in here, these are strings that they're putting in here. We're not going to put in strings, we're going to put variables. So we're going to look at our variables, and remember, our variables that represent these things are $sign first, $sign last, species. So we're going to be using these down here. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to put in our variables. And you could really do this. This might make sense to even copy all 4 of these and then paste all 4 of these. Now we're not going to have quotes because they're not, remember, they're not strings. And then we're going to have $signs in front of all these that will be converting these to their variables, the fact that they have the $signs. And I don't know if we need the semicolon here. I guess I'll leave it there because that was there. If it's a problem, we can get rid of it. And I'll move this over so it looks nice. So that looks okay as far as what we have so far. So this is a variable that's basically going to insert them in. Now we didn't do anything. We didn't connect yet. So I'm going to move this up here. We didn't do the connect yet. And that's where we're going to do the mySQLi query. And here it has mySQLi query. And then we could go back and check that out. Now I'm going to get out of this thing. And I'm actually going to go back to my mySQLi. So I have to go back to PHP, scroll down to the bottom, and there's the mySQLi. And I'm going to go look for the one that was the query. We were talking about that one. And here's the mySQLi query. And there it is. And I'm just going to copy it here. And I'm going to go back here and and paste it, except we're not going to be using this. I'm going to take that out of there. And remember, we're going to be using con because we've been using the double N. So we're going to be using con, and then what we're going to do is be using this, because this represents that whole statement. So I'm going to put that in there so it represents the whole statement. So that's how our MySQLi query is going to run, and this is the one that's just basically inserting in there. And I mentioned here having an or die, and you could do this. You could, if you want to copy this thing, you could literally copy this, put it right here if you want. You don't have to have that, but you could throw it in there. So that's going to connect there. So if that connects, if it dies, you're going to get a thing that says error querying database. So we could throw that in there, and that looks okay. So I'm going to save that so far. Then I'll go add some space here. So that's the first part of it. So this is the part that's basically inserting into our database. It's not displaying on our page yet. It's inserting into our database. And one thing we could try, even with anything else, we're not displaying any results on our page yet. We could try and see if we can insert to a database. There's nothing wrong with trying it out. I'll save it. We'll see how this works. I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to backspace, and I'm going to refresh this. Or actually, I should probably go back and then open it up again. And I'm just going to make up some names here. I'm going to put Harry, and he is I guess just fish. His species will be fish, and we'll put male since his name is Harry. And I'm going to hit submit, and we'll see what happens here. Now we get an error. All right, and I troubleshooted my problem here. Here's Harry Halibut. I got him added. Here it says, now it doesn't display it yet because we didn't write any code to display it yet. But the error that I had is I was supposed to have single quotes around these. I took those quotes out, but when I was looking back at other code, these do need to have, even though there's variables in there, they're looking for them to be kind of put forth as a string, so it knows to pull that out. So these do need, even though they're variables, they do need the quotes around them. These do not, because they're just the column names, but these actually, the values that go in here, because that's the way the SQL works, they always want quotes in here. So these, even though they're variables that are representing the information that's going in there, they do need quotes. So that's what wasn't working. Everything else, seemed like it was working okay. So that works. So we actually inserted, by using our form here, we actually submitted something to the database. If I put something else here, like he'll be male because he's Freddie, and we'll submit that, and everything's successful here. And then if I go to my database, and it doesn't show right away, I think we just have to hit browse again. And now we see Freddie Fisherman got added to our database. So we're actually adding things to our database. And remember, if you got away from this, you have to log in again. So we have to make sure that we're logged in. And notice that it's creating its own ID, and it's also putting the city in here, even though we're just putting the 4 values in there. So that's working, so that's good. So the only thing we learned from there is that we got to have our quotes here when we do an insert into. Let's take a break here for part 2, and then we'll move on to part 3, where we actually display the database.